How do you survive the moment you realize that everything you built, everything you bled for, was treated like it meant nothing? I still remember the way my chest tightened, how the air in the room turned thick and suffocating, as I stared at the man who just smiled and said, "It's just business." That day wasn't just another corporate betrayal. It was the day I watched a decade of sacrifice get swept off the table like dust. And yet, what they didn't know, what even I hadn't fully understood until that brutal moment, was that they hadn't erased me. They had set me free. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just another workplace drama. It's the story of how my life shattered and how I rebuilt it into something they never saw coming. If you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or betrayed when you gave your whole heart, this is for you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button, because together, we're creating a space where silent pain turns into unstoppable strength. My name is Elena Wren. I'm 30 years old, and for nearly a decade, I devoted my life to a company my father built from nothing. I wasn't just building spreadsheets or strategies. I was trying to preserve a legacy. I thought loyalty would be enough. I thought hard work would protect me. I was wrong. The day Martin fired me was the day I stopped apologizing for taking up space. For 8 years, I had walked the same hallways of Rentec, the company my father built from nothing. 8 years of being Elena Wren, his daughter, his legacy, but never quite my own person. Not in their eyes. Anyway, I was 30 when it happened, director of market analytics on paper, but Jack's kid in whispers. Every morning, I'd pass the large portrait of my father in the lobby, his eyes kind but determined, his smile reserved for those who earned it. Sometimes I'd stop and look up at him. I'm still here. Dad. I'd think, I'm still trying. After he died 3 years ago, everything changed. The board appointed Martin Ree as CEO, a visionary leader they called him. What they meant was that he knew how to make shareholders happy. What they didn't say was how he'd gut my father's principles to do it. Elena, we need quick wins, not long-term investments, Martin would say, dismissing my market research that showed exactly what my father always believed, that ethical business was sustainable business. In meetings, I'd present comprehensive analyses only to have Martin interrupt with, "Let's circle back to the actionable items." Translation: let's ignore Elena's expertise and go with whatever I decided before walking in. My team knew better. Maya from data science, Kevin from UX research. They came to my office with their real ideas, the innovative ones that couldn't survive Martin's streamlining. Together, we built shadows of what could have been. Keeping my father's vision alive in corners, Martin didn't bother to look. At nights, I'd sit in my apartment overlooking the bay, surrounded by houseplants my father had taught me to care for. Companies are like these plants, Ellie, he once told me. They need patience, attention to detail, and the right conditions to thrive, not just aggressive pruning for show. I'd water each one methodically, trying to quiet the voice inside that whispered I was failing him. I dated occasionally, but relationships stalled when they discovered I was married to my work, to preserving something they couldn't see the value of. You could work anywhere, my last boyfriend said when we broke up. Why stay where you're not appreciated? The truth was complicated. Maybe I stayed because leaving felt like abandonment. Maybe because deep down, I still believed that merit would eventually be recognized. Or maybe I was simply afraid that without Rentec, I wouldn't know who I was anymore. On my 30th birthday, 2 months before the firing, I received a letter from Mr. Harrington, our family lawyer. "Your father asked that this be delivered to you now," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. I placed it in my desk drawer at home, unable to open it that night. Some part of me knew it would change everything, and I wasn't ready yet. Looking back, I understand now what I couldn't see then, that we often mistake endurance for strength, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to stop holding on to what's breaking you. Have you ever stayed somewhere you weren't valued, hoping that one day they'd finally see you? The morning Martin fired me was deceptively beautiful. San Francisco had shed its usual fog, and sunlight streamed through my office windows, casting honeyed rectangles across my desk. I remember noticing how the light caught the edge of the framed photo of my father and me at my college graduation, making the silver frame gleam. The knock was sharp, impatient. 3 raps. Then the door swung open before I could respond. Martin stood there in his tailored gray suit, flanked by Diane from HR, a woman who specialized in expressionless efficiency. "Elena, we need to talk," Martin said, not bothering to sit down. I knew. Something in his stance, the way he positioned himself near the door like he was preparing for a quick exit, told me everything before he spoke another word. "As part of our ongoing restructuring efforts, we're consolidating several departments," he said, sounding like he was reading from an internal memo. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air between us. I watched Martin's eyes dart to my computer, then to the wall behind me, anywhere but directly at me. "But our quarterly numbers are up 15%, I said quietly. "My team delivered the Westridge analysis 2 weeks ahead of schedule." Martin cleared his throat. "This isn't about performance metrics. The company is moving in a different direction. And frankly, Elena, you're better at managing tasks than leading people. We need visionaries in director positions. Visionaries. Like him." He meant people who could see the future, even if that future trampled over everything my father had built. "Diane will walk you through the exit process," he continued, already half-turned toward the door. "Your team will report to Greg Jenkins starting Monday." Greg Jenkins, the man who had once said during a happy hour that data analysis is just making pretty charts for executives who've already made up their minds. I didn't argue, didn't plead. Years of being underestimated had taught me the futility of defending myself to people who had decided not to see me. Instead, I nodded and began gathering my things. The photo of my father, a small jade plant that had survived 3 office moves, a notebook filled with ideas that would never see implementation now. "You'll need to turn in your security badge before leaving," Diane said, her voice clinically detached. I slipped the small plastic rectangle from my lanyard and placed it on the desk. 8 years of work, reduced to a deactivated piece of plastic. As I carried my box through the open workspace, I caught glimpses of my colleagues' faces, some shocked, some quickly averting their eyes, a few showing genuine distress. Maya stood up as if to come to me, but I gave a small shake of my head. Not here, not now. The elevator ride to the lobby was silent, 23 floors of memories compressed into a 60-second descent. Outside, the sunshine felt like an insult. I stood on the sidewalk, box in arms, staring up at the building with my family name etched in steel across the top. Rentec, my father's dream. And now, no longer my workplace. What Martin didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that 3 nights before, I had finally opened my father's letter. What would you do if everything you thought you'd lost was suddenly back in your hands? My apartment felt different that night after being fired, smaller, yet somehow less confining. I set my box of belongings on the kitchen counter and moved to the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk descended over San Francisco Bay. 3 nights earlier, I had finally opened my father's letter. I remember how my hands had trembled. Breaking the wax seal with my father's initials, inside was a single sheet of heavy cream stationery and a legal document. "My dearest Elena," he had written in his precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, I've been gone for some time, and you've reached your 30th birthday. There are things I couldn't tell you while I was alive, business arrangements that needed to stay confidential until now." I had to sit down as I read the next lines. "Rentec has always been meant for you, not as a gift, but as a responsibility I knew you would grow into. I didn't want you burdened too early. Nor did I want the board and shareholders treating you differently because of what you now hold. I gave you the table, not just a seat at it. The enclosed documents confirm your 90% controlling interest in Rentec, held in trust until now." That night, I had called Mr. Harrington, my voice barely steady. "Is this real?" I asked when he answered. "Very real," he replied. "Your father arranged everything meticulously. Caroline Winters has been the trustee, voting the shares as per your father's instructions until you were ready. Now, standing on my balcony 3 days after losing my job, I dialed Caroline's number. An hour later, she arrived at my door, a tall woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. I'd met her only a handful of times at company functions, where she'd seemed pleasant but unremarkable. That had been deliberate. I now realized, "I've been watching over you for years," Caroline said as she accepted the tea I offered. "Your father was very specific. I was to be invisible, but vigilant." "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. The question that had been burning since I'd opened the letter. Caroline studied me before answering. "He wanted you to learn the company from the ground up, without the weight of ownership clouding your judgment or others' perception of you. And he wanted to protect you from those who might try to manipulate a young heiress. Like Martin," I said softly. "Especially like Martin." She nodded. "I voted against his appointment, but was outvoted by the other board members. Your father anticipated something like this might happen." Over the next 3 weeks, I worked quietly with Caroline and Mr. Harrington. My apartment became command central, walls covered with organizational charts, financial reports, and employee satisfaction surveys that HR had buried. "The company's numbers look good on paper," I told them one night, pointing to a chart. "But they're hiding serious problems. Innovation is down 40% since Dad died. Employee turnover in key departments has doubled. They're burning through talent to make quarterly targets." I'd spent years collecting this data, watching trends, keeping notes in a journal I'd titled, "What Dad Would See," not because I'd anticipated this moment, but because I couldn't stop being who I was, someone who believed in measuring what mattered, not just what's shown. We discovered other troubling patterns. Martin had quietly replaced most of my father's original leadership team. Ethics complaints had risen sharply. Several promising research initiatives, including one developing affordable medical diagnostic tools for underserved communities, had been shelved despite promising early results. "He's dismantling everything my father built," I said one evening, my voice breaking for the first time since being fired. Caroline placed her hand over mine. "Then we'll rebuild it," she said simply. I reached out discreetly to former colleagues who had left under Martin's regime. Kevin, my former UX research lead, who had quit in protest after Martin killed an accessibility project, Sophia from legal, who had submitted multiple warnings about compliance issues that were ignored. Even Thomas, my father's original CFO, who had retired mysteriously a year after Martin took over. Each conversation confirmed what I already knew. Martin wasn't just changing the company, he was corrupting it. "When do we move?" Mr. G. Harrington asked one evening as we reviewed the final documentation confirming my controlling interest. I looked at the calendar on my wall. "The quarterly board meeting is next Thursday. That gives us 8 days to prepare." That night, I stood before my closet, pushing aside the casual clothes I'd been living in since the firing. In the back hung a navy suit I'd bought but never worn. Too authoritative, I'd thought at the time, for someone trying to blend in. I pulled it out now, removing the price tags that still dangled from the sleeve. Sometimes, power doesn't announce itself with thunder. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, wrapped in navy blue, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Have you ever discovered strength in yourself that others had deliberately overlooked? The Rentec boardroom occupied the entire northwest corner of the 34th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Golden Gate Bridge. I used to love that view. Today, I barely noticed it. I arrived early, with Mr. Harrington and Caroline flanking me. The security guard at the front desk did a double-take as I approached, my Rentec visitor badge already in place. "Ms. Wren, I thought," he began. "I have a board meeting to attend." "Carl," I said, smiling. I remembered his name. Martin never would have. He nodded, something like satisfaction flickering across his face as he waved us through. We took the executive elevator, the one I'd never been allowed to use as a director. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nervous? Caroline asked softly as we ascended. I smoothed the lapel of my navy suit. No, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing. We arrived 20 minutes before the scheduled start. Hannah, the board secretary, nearly dropped her tablet when she saw me. Ms. Wren! The meeting isn't open to... I'm aware. Hannah, I said, my voice calm. Please continue your setup. We'll wait. The boardroom slowly filled with familiar faces, men and women who had nodded politely at company functions, but never truly seen me. Their confusion at my presence was palpable. A ripple of whispers and sidelong glances. Martin was the last to arrive. 7 minutes late, as was his custom, a power move I'd observed countless times. He stopped abruptly in the doorway when he saw me. Elena, he said, recovering quickly. This is a closed board meeting. I didn't stand. I'm aware. Martin, please, take your seat. We have a full agenda today. His eyes narrowed, darting to Mr. Harrington and Caroline, then back to me. Something flickered across his face, the first inkling that something wasn't proceeding according to his script. Nevertheless, he moved to the head of the table, straightening his tie. I wasn't informed we had guests today, he began, addressing the board. While I'm sure Elena has... Actually, I interrupted, sliding a folder to each board member. I'm not a guest. I nodded to Hannah, who connected my laptop to the room's display system, the screen behind Martin filled with the trust documents, my ownership stake highlighted in yellow. As of my 30th birthday last month, I continued, I hold 90% of Rentec's voting shares, previously held in trust by Ms. Winters according to my father's estate plan. The room fell silent. Martin's face drained of color as he scanned the document before him. This isn't... You can't, he sputtered. It is, and I can, I said evenly. And now that we've established my standing, I'd like to address the board regarding the company's direction. For the next 30 minutes, I presented what we'd uncovered, slides of data that told the true story behind Rentec's glossy quarterly reports, employee satisfaction in free fall, innovation metrics collapsing, ethics complaints buried, market share maintained only by sacrificing the values that had built the company. Rentec was founded on the principle that technology should serve humanity, not just shareholders, I said, looking each board member in the eye. Under current leadership, we've abandoned that mission. I turned to face Martin directly. Mr. Rhee has systematically dismantled my father's vision while presenting surface-level success. He has terminated employees who questioned his methods, myself included, and created a culture of fear rather than innovation. Martin pushed back from the table. This is absurd. Our numbers speak for themselves. Revenues are up 22% year over year. At what cost? I countered, advancing to the next slide. Research and development spending cut by 33%. Community investment programs eliminated. 3 pending lawsuits from former employees alleging hostile work environment, all settled with NDAs. I looked around the table. Is this the company my father built? Is this the legacy you were appointed to protect? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of recognition, of uncomfortable truth finally acknowledged. I call for an immediate vote on leadership, I said quietly. As majority shareholder, I move to remove Martin Rhee as CEO, effective immediately. You can't just walk in here and... Martin began, his voice rising. I second the motion, Caroline said firmly. All in favor? I asked. My hand went up. With 90% of voting shares, it was the only hand that needed to... Motion carried, Mr. Harrington announced formally. Martin stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You'll regret this," he hissed, gathering his things. "You have no idea what it takes to run this company." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Martin, you had no idea what this company was meant to be." He stormed out, the door banging shut behind him. In the silence that followed, I felt the weight of what I'd just done, not just reclaiming my birthright, but accepting the responsibility that came with it. "Ms. Wren," one of the board members said finally, "what happens now?" I looked at the empty CEO chair, then back at the people around the table. Some looked shocked, others calculating, a few even relieved. "Now," I said, "we rebuild." As I stood in that boardroom, I wondered, what would you fight for if you suddenly had the power to change everything? I didn't move into the CEO's office that day, or the next. In fact, for the first 2 weeks after the board meeting, I worked from a small conference room on the 26th floor, close enough to the teams to hear the real conversations, far enough from the executive suite to break the patterns of the past. The first person I called after the meeting was Maya from my old analytics team. "I need truth tellers," I told her over coffee the next morning. "People who haven't forgotten what we're supposed to stand for." Maya's eyes widened as I explained what had happened. "You own the company this whole time?" I didn't know either, I admitted. "But now that I do, I need your help." She became my ground zero, the person who knew which managers supported their teams and which ones ruled through fear, which projects had been killed for political reasons, which voices had been silenced. Together, we walked every floor of the building that first week, not with an entourage or scheduled photo ops, but quietly, listening more than speaking. In the developer pit, I found Raj, a brilliant engineer who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times because he refused to cut corners on security features. "What would you change if you could?" I asked him. He looked startled that the new CEO, the founder's daughter, was standing by his desk, actually asking his opinion. "We need to rebuild our quality assurance processes," he said finally. "We're releasing products too fast, with too many vulnerabilities. It's going to hurt us eventually." I nodded. "Put together a proposal. You have until Friday." In marketing, I found Lisa struggling with campaigns she didn't believe in. "We're making promises our products don't keep," she confessed when I pressed. "It feels wrong." "Then let's make products worth honest marketing," I told her. My second call had been to Kevin, asking him to return as our new head of user experience. "I can't promise it will be easy," I told him. "We've got a lot to fix." "Easy is overrated," he replied. "I'm in." There were hard decisions, too. 3 of Martin's senior VPs were asked to leave, men who'd thrived in the culture of intimidation he'd created. Several mid-level managers who'd been cited repeatedly in exit interviews followed. When I finally moved into the CEO office after a month, I had the imposing mahogany desk removed and replaced with a simple work table and comfortable chairs. The oil paintings of San Francisco landscapes went back to corporate storage, replaced by framed photographs of team achievements and innovation awards we'd won in my father's day. "It doesn't look like a CEO's office," observed Thomas, my father's former CFO, whom I'd persuaded to return as an advisor. "Good," I replied. "I don't want walls between me and the truth." We launched what I called the People First Initiative, not just another corporate slogan, but a fundamental rebuilding of how we operated. We created anonymous channels for employees to flag ethical concerns. We reinstated the innovation time my father had always protected, 1 day a week, for engineers to work on passion projects. We reviewed salaries and discovered patterns of inequity that were promptly corrected. Not everyone was happy. 2 board members resigned in protest of what they called my inexperience. Several shareholders expressed concern about short-term profits. The business press ran articles questioning whether Jack Wren's daughter could fill his shoes. I kept the articles in a folder, not to brood over, but to remind myself that transforming a company culture wasn't supposed to be easy or universally popular. 6 months in, I was working late one evening when Maya knocked on my office door. "You need to see something," she said, a strange expression on her face. She led me to the main development floor, empty now except for the blue glow of security lighting. On the large whiteboard where architectural diagrams usually lived, someone had written in bold letters, "She came back." Beneath it, dozens of signatures and messages from the team had accumulated throughout the day. "Thank you for listening. Innovation matters again. Proud to work here now." I stood there in the half-dark, throat tight, unable to speak. "They wanted you to know," Maya said softly beside me. That night, I cried for the first time since my father died. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that his legacy hadn't been lost after all. It had just been waiting for someone to reclaim it. The next morning, I brought in cupcakes for the entire floor and added my own signature to the board. "We're just getting started." Have you ever realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up and listen to the people who weren't being heard? 1 year after Martin's departure, I finally felt ready to fully claim the CEO's office as my own space. The transition hadn't been perfect. We'd lost some clients who preferred Martin's approach, and our stock had dipped briefly before beginning a steady climb on the strength of our renewed innovation pipeline. The morning of my 1-year anniversary as CEO, I arrived early to find my office transformed. My team had snuck in overnight to decorate. Streamers hung from the ceiling. A 1 year of real leadership banner stretched across one wall, and dozens of handwritten notes from employees covered my desk. "You made it safe to bring my whole self to work." One read, "My daughter wants to be like you when she grows up," said another. "I canceled 3 job interviews after you took over." A third confessed, "I was still reading them, blinking back tears." When Thomas knocked on my door, "Ready for the board presentation?" he asked. I gathered my notes and straightened my jacket. As I'll ever be. The boardroom felt different now. We'd added 4 new members, 2 women and 2 men, each selected for their commitment to ethical business practices and long-term thinking. The remaining original members had gradually shifted from skepticism to cautious support as our results began to speak for themselves. "Good morning," I began, standing not at the head of the table where Martin had always positioned himself, but at its center. Today marks 1 year since we began our transformation journey. I didn't need PowerPoint slides or rehearsed speeches. Instead, I placed a single document before each board member, a simple comparison of where we stood then versus now. Employee retention, up 34%. Innovation metrics, up 28%. Customer satisfaction, up 17%. Revenue, up 12%. Stock price, up 15%. The numbers tell part of the story. I said, but not all of it. I pulled out my phone and played a short video we'd created, interviews with employees across the company, speaking candidly about the change in culture. "I'm not afraid to point out problems anymore," said a quality assurance specialist. "We're building things that matter again," added a senior developer. "I can look my kids in the eye when I tell them what I do," said a marketing manager. When the video ended, I put my phone away and looked around the table. A year ago, I said we would rebuild. Today, I'm not here to tell you we've finished that work. I'm here to tell you it's just the beginning. For the next hour, I outlined our vision for the coming year. New product initiatives focused on using technology to address real human needs, expanded employee development programs, deeper community partnerships. Rentech was never meant to be just another tech company, I concluded. My father built it to be a force for positive change. That's the legacy I'm committed to carrying forward. As the meeting adjourned, the board chair, one of our new additions, stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "I hope so," I replied. Back in my office, I found one last note I'd missed earlier, tucked inside my desk drawer. The handwriting was immediately recognizable. Caroline's elegant script. "Your father told me once that power reveals who we truly are." It read, "Yours has revealed a leader of integrity and vision. The table is where it belongs." That afternoon, I walked the halls again, stopping to chat with the interns in the break room, sharing cupcakes left over from the morning's celebration. A young woman named Gia, recently hired from a coding boot camp, asked tentatively if I had any advice for someone just starting out. I thought for a moment, leadership isn't about volume or titles. I told her, it's about accountability, vision, and doing the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Later, as the office emptied for the day, I paused in the lobby, looking up at my father's portrait. The building around me hummed with a different energy now. Purposeful, creative, alive. We're doing okay. Dad, I whispered, we're finding our way back. If you found yourself responsible for other people's livelihoods and dreams, what values would guide your decisions? 2 years have passed since the day Martin fired me. Sometimes I still wake up with the echo of his dismissive words, "You're better at managing tasks than leading people," before remembering how thoroughly time has proven him wrong. This morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to paint the bay with golden light as I made my coffee in the community kitchen. No private executive coffee service for me, despite the board's insistence that my time was too valuable for such things. These small interactions, these moments of normalcy, keep me grounded in what matters. Rentec today is barely recognizable from the company Martin was dismantling. We've launched 3 major products in the past year alone, all focused on our renewed mission of technology that serves humanity. Our medical diagnostics platform is now in use in rural clinics across 5 countries. Our educational software is helping first-generation college students navigate academic systems designed to exclude them. Our data privacy tools are setting new industry standards. More importantly, the culture has healed. You can feel it the moment you step off the elevator, in the animated discussions happening in open workspaces, in the diversity of voices contributing to meetings, in the way people look you in the eye and speak their truth without fear. Yesterday, I received a letter from a company in Seattle trying to recruit Raj from our engineering team. Instead of accepting their offer, he'd forwarded it to me with a simple note. "Thought you should know I'm getting interest. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. We're building something that matters here." I keep that note pinned to my bulletin board as a reminder of what real success looks like. Not everything is perfect. Of course. We still face challenges, aggressive competitors, technological disruptions, the constant pressure of market expectations. Some days I feel the weight of every decision, the responsibility of every person whose livelihood depends on getting things right. On those days, I often find myself in the small memorial garden we created on our rooftop terrace, dedicated to my father. It's a peaceful space with native plants and a simple bench where I can sit and think. I understand now. I told him silently on a recent difficult day why you structured things the way you did, why you made me earn my place first. He knew what I've come to learn, that power without perspective corrupts, that leadership without empathy fails, that the view from the top is meaningless if you've never seen the view from below. This morning, after my coffee, I stopped by our UX research lab where Kevin was testing a new interface with a diverse group of users. He waved me in, introducing me not as the CEO, but simply as Elena, who works with us on product strategy. I sat with an elderly man navigating our health monitoring dashboard, listening to his frustrations and insights. "This button should be bigger," he told me, unaware he was speaking to the person who could make that happen with a single word. "My grandson would love this, but my old eyes need help. We'll fix that," I promised, making notes. What else can we improve? By lunchtime, the design team had already implemented his suggestions and several others. By next week, thousands of users will have a better experience because we listened to one voice that might otherwise have gone unheard. That's the company we've become: responsive, human, connected to real needs. Last month at our all-hands meeting, a new employee raised her hand during the Q&A session. "What's the most important quality you look for when hiring people?" she asked. I thought about Martin and his visionaries, about performance metrics and power moves and intimidation tactics. Integrity. I answered without hesitation. Technical skills can be taught, market knowledge can be acquired, but integrity, doing the right thing even when it's difficult or unpopular, that's the foundation everything else is built on. As I walk through our offices now, I sometimes catch glimpses of my reflection in the glass walls, a woman who looks more like her father every day, not in features, but in the quiet confidence of purpose. I am no longer walking in his shadow. I am extending the path he began. The company is thriving, not because I wrested control through dramatic confrontation, but because I created space for good people to do their best work. Not because I had all the answers, but because I asked better questions. Not because I wielded power like a weapon, but because I used it as a tool to build something worthy. In the end, this isn't a story about revenge. Though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't satisfaction in proving Martin wrong. It's not even a story about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, though the company is indeed where it belongs. This is a story about belonging itself, about creating a place where people can bring their full talents and truths, where work has meaning beyond metrics, where leadership serves something larger than ego. Tonight, as I turn off my office light and head home, I pause at my father's portrait in the lobby. I don't say anything this time. I just smile, knowing he would understand what I've finally come to learn, that the most powerful leadership doesn't announce itself with thunder. It reveals itself in the quiet transformation of what once was broken into something whole again. What kind of leader would you become if you suddenly found yourself with the power to change everything? Sometimes, the moments that break us are the very ones that set us free. If my story stirred something in you, if you've ever stood at the edge of everything familiar and had to choose yourself, then you already know. We don't just survive betrayal, we rise because of it. I'd love to hear where you are right now in your own story. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts, your city, your journey. And if this resonated with you even a little, hit that subscribe button. Your support gives me the strength to keep sharing more true stories, the ones that aren't just about endings, but about powerful new beginnings. Let's keep growing together.